much. And first of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I'm honored to be here today in this magnificent room and with a group of people that I'm sure know a lot more in detail about many of the things that we'll be speaking about today than some of us in the panel, at least I'm speaking for myself here. What I will be addressing today is from a Science Europe perspective, particularly the scientific voice of the Scientific Committee for the Humanities. And for those of you who are less familiar with Science Europe, it's a fairly new organization on the European scene with a particular aim to address policy issues on a pan-European level from a strong researcher's point of view. So we consider ourselves to be the voice of, or one of the strong voices of researchers on the European scene. So I thought what I'd do today was to address some of the key issues that are raised in the invitation for today, with a particular reference to how we see this in the Scientific Committee for the Humanities at Science Europe and in Science Europe in wider terms. So first of all, I think it's important to stress in terms of what humanities and social sciences can offer. This is always a good point for reflection in terms of what we can offer, in particular with reference to the inclusive, reflective and innovative societies. That is, of course, what is in the parlance of the Commission, the Grant Challenge 6 of Horizon 2020. And I do think that humanities and social sciences have lots and lots to offer, and I'll just flag up some of the key themes here. As is well known, humanities and social sciences address the human factor in research, and the human factor has always been important to research. And I think in an age of austerity that we're facing at the moment, the human factor is more important than ever. So we are concerned with people's sense-making in the world in terms of, in particular within the humanities, ways in which we engage with various forms of science, be it words, print, images, or whatever, and also the material world, of course, to make sense of the world. Also very importantly here is that, particularly within the humanities, we offer a historical perspective on the present. And this should, I think, again be stressed at a time where we often think that what we face at the moment has not been faced before. I think that there the humanities, by way of our historical perspective, can offer a kind of a sobering perspective on much of the research issues that are addressed today. And so in general, I'd say that the wider research community of the social sciences and humanities offer challenges to the often very rational way of thinking about how people make decisions in their lives. And we have to, I think, use these resources in order to address key issues that are also key in the Horizon 2020 about the human factor. It's more than rational decision making, and we have the scientific resources to document those other aspects. Also, I think a very important aspect to offer is that humanities and social sciences do have the scientific resources to address some of the key terms in Horizon 2020 at large. Everybody talks about the buzzwords of innovation and inclusion, creativity, knowledge production, and so on. But where do you find research on those kinds of issues? You do find that in the humanities and social sciences. And so it's very important that we as research communities are aware that we have the resources to address those issues in a scientific sense. And there has been a tendency, for those of you who are familiar with the work programs that we've seen drafts of so far, to think about innovation as a kind of, I'd say, a kind of higher consultancy that you can pull in after the event, you know, when you've done your climate research, when you've done your research on an aging society and so on, then of course we can pull in some kind of innovative firms and so on and so forth. Well, you know, I think the humanities and social sciences have key research resources to offer here to say we also need to address these issues as research issues. And in humanities in particular, I think we would do well to think about ways in which for example, creative arts and design have tackled those issues for ages. And also, I should say that ways in which we could begin to address these issues in an interdisciplinary fashion is very well illuminated by the recent recent collaborative projects and project programs that HERA has offered, where creativity and innovation, of course, has been one. And if you think about the number of applicants for that and the number of very, very high quality applications, you will see that there is in the wider Europe a huge research resource to draw on here. Also, I think it's important here to stress that when we speak about innovation, we have to take a wide definition of what innovation is. And again, this is a bit of a challenge to what we see in the draft working programs, where innovation is often thought of in kind of linear terms, that, you know, people get good ideas, you do a bit of research, and then it's put to the test, particularly in small and medium-sized firms. Well, it's not as linear as that. And it's not just about economic innovation. Cultural and social innovation are absolutely key here. And I know from the Nordic countries of Europe, a number of studies have been documenting ways in which, for example, the public sector is more innovative than many small and medium-sized firms are. So we need, again, if we want to harness the kind of the resources in wider Europe, it's important to not only think about innovation in narrow economic terms and not just address to small and medium-sized firms, but also in a wider sense to include the public sector and include the third sectors as well. What is often forgotten in terms of resources in the humanities and social sciences, and maybe particularly in the humanities, is that we harness very robust methodologies to study sense-making in the world. It's often thought, you know, if you take a fairly narrow definition of scientific research, that humanities is kind of soft science. I'd side very much with Professor Freely here in stating that humanities have more in common with the other sciences than differences. And we do have robust methodologies to study sense-making in the world. And also, very important here, methodologies that carry over, not just in terms of studying innovation and inclusion and creativity and so on, which we have done for ages, but also, very importantly, addressing issues to do with some of the grant challenges that, for better or worse, will probably carry a lot of weight in Horizon 2020. Let me just flag up something, just to give you an example. In my hotel room, I found this little flyer here, and it was to do with energy waste, and it had helpful tips for the home. And it said, don't overfill your kettle, for example, and make sure that you walk and bicycle instead of taking the car. There are lots of, you know, good tips for the citizens here. And so, again, this is just not propaganda. We need research on how people actually take up, negotiate, or do not take up these kinds of negotiations. And there, for example, good old discourse theory and narrativity theory, which has been around the humanities for ages, is absolutely key to address those kinds of issues. So I'd be keen to see humanities also being out there addressing some of the key issues in the other grant challenges. And we do have, as I said, we do have robust theories and methodologies to do so. And last but not least, in terms of resources, we do have experiences with interdisciplinary research. It's often, you know, the assumption out there in the general public is often that humanities is a very diverse, very kind of scattered field. But in my experience, on a day-to-day basis, where at the research center that I direct, we work with the natural sciences, I'd say that the natural sciences are equally connected and equally scattered as are the humanities. And again, I'd stress the importance in the communal basis for research here, and stressing the fact that humanities do have experience with interdisciplinary research. And again, I think HERA offers excellent examples about how that could be done on a pan-European level, and also some of the cost actions and the ESF actions in the past have demonstrated that. But we shouldn't just be congratulating ourselves about how much we have on offer. We also need to address some of the very real obstacles to how to have these resources materialize. I think one of the key obstacles in terms of realizing and harnessing humanities and social science resources in Horizon 2020 is what I call silos of the mind. And silos of the mind are within every researcher, but it's also silos of the mind on an organizational level. It's within, you know, the way in which research is thought of as being well conducted in the discourses around this within research agencies, funding bodies, at universities, and of course within the actual research communities. And here I think we need to begin to address those kinds of silos of the mind, at least on an organizational level, and very real also to begin to address how we could tackle those kinds of obstacles on a pan-European level. And just to flag up a very real and very recent example from my domestic background, in Denmark, the Danish Research Agency has recently constituted reference groups that map the grant challenges in Horizon 2020. So there has been a consultation process whereby the Danish Research Agency has consulted universities about signing up for members to these reference groups. And out of 136 members in the 6 grant challenges that are not to do with the humanities and social sciences, that means all the grant challenges except Challenge 6, 106 researchers were, in a sense, appointed to a reference group by the Danish Research Agency. 2 of those were from the humanities. 19 were from the social sciences. And if you looked at the scientific composition of people from the social sciences in those reference groups, they were economists and people from political science. No anthropologists, no people from education, no people from psychology, no people from sociology, no people from virtually, most of the other areas of the humanities and social sciences. So I think this goes to say that there's a lot of, room for improvement in terms of reversing those kinds of comfortable ways of thinking about who the experts are in these challenges here. In the grant challenges. And just to be fair to the Danish Research Agency, when some of us did point out that this was probably not what would be intended by the Commission in terms of mainstreaming humanities and social sciences in all the grant challenges, they have opened up for additional membership, but only after the event, so to speak. So I don't think this is, I don't mention this just to, in a sense, be unfair to my own domestic background, but to just give it as an example of what I would consider to be wider kind of routines that take place if you're not very careful. So therefore, I think we need to be very alert to what types of actions could we make in order to address those kinds of obstacles and minimize those kinds of obstacles. And as has been mentioned in the position paper from Science Europe about the humanities and social sciences in the Horizon 2020, and I think it's in your conference map, I know it's in your conference map, I'd just like to flag up that we find it absolutely vital at Science Europe to integrate humanities and social sciences from the outset, and humanities and social sciences expertise in the advisory groups that are absolutely key to have consultation with the Commission about how the actual work programs are going, what they're going to look like. This is absolutely vital, and Science Europe has also offered, in the dialogue with the Commission to help identify people with excellent expertise in the various areas. And here I'm talking not only, of course, about Challenge 6, but very importantly, as you can hear me from my examples, very importantly, also humanities and social science expertise in the other grant challenges. Very importantly also, of course, is to be in constant dialogue about the budgetary frame. As we know, those of us who have been, I've been one of the members on the program committee for social sciences and humanities in FP7, we had 1.8% of the budget. And the last time I checked, the success rate for social sciences and humanities in FP7 was 3.5%. You can just as well draw lots with that kind of a success rate. And just to in a sense, parallel that with the work program with the highest success rate, which is nanotechnology and material sciences, 46% success rate. 46%, ladies and gentlemen. It's a factor of 10, more than a factor of 10 different. I'm not saying that in Horizon 2020 we'll have equal success rates, but I do think that there's at least an issue here to be tackled. And I know that in the European Research Council there has been discussions about success rates here, so I think we need to tackle that as well. And so I'd like to round off by saying, what can the research communities do and what can the universities do? What are these kind of organizational ways in which we can begin to minimize those silos of the mind? I think it's fair to say that we need for the humanities, maybe in particular for the humanities research communities, to begin to broaden our vision in terms of engaging with the wider public outside of our own disciplinary boundaries. And a first step in that direction is to begin to, what some of my younger scholars have taught me is the elevator speech. You know, if you meet your director in an elevator, you should be able in 3 minutes to say, what is it I do? And I think we could begin to train an elevator speech with a simple exercise of beginning to ask ourselves what kind of research questions is it we address in history, in literature, in all the range of areas that the humanities cover. And I'd say that probably goes for social sciences as well, although I'm less familiar with that. But to, in a sense, begin to ask ourselves those kinds of questions is one way in which we can begin to identify our own research resources in engaging with the wider community. And I think that could be a good exercise. And I know it's something that is already being done, of course, by a number of research groups in the humanities that we have witnessed over the past decades. But again, I think we could do more here, and that would be a very good stepping stone in what Ola Freely also talked about in terms of how can we think about what could be termed a research ecology from the individual researcher to the university to the national level of research funding and then into the wider European area of research. So I think this would be an easy step in a sense. Very importantly also is for universities to begin to take action. I think there's really, in lots of areas, there's room for improvement in terms of making organizational facilitation of interdisciplinary interaction between humanities, social sciences, and the other sciences. And I speak here from a continental definition of science, the German Forschung, where you think about science as a very inclusive term here. I think universities could do more to ease those kinds of interdisciplinary dialogues. Again, that would ease the research communities in the humanities and social sciences in terms of mainstreaming our resources vis-a-vis the other grant challenges. Last but not least, I think that humanities research communities, we could do more to engage in a more systematic way with stakeholders on a pan-European level beyond the research community. And at Science Europe, in the Humanities Scientific Committee, we're very concerned to begin to have a more sustained dialogue with pan-European stakeholders that are outside of the academy and who might be able to, in a sense, cast some light, an interesting light on where they see humanities resources in the pan-European area. So I think that it's important, and this would be my way, by way of conclusion, it's important to think of humanities and social science resources not as a linear kind of pathway and stream of resources, but as a kind of a networked process where there are lots of stakeholders, and the research voices have maybe in the past been less eloquent and less loud than they could be, but I think we are on the right track. So thank you.